Digimon Tamers is the third season in the Digimon franchise overall, and quite inarguably the darkest in tone. This is the season that made the bold move of deviating from the structure of its predecessors, developing a style all its own. When I first learned of this season, I must admit that I was not as skeptical as most. I was used to the idea of new characters and was open to innovative ideas, although I was not certain that Tamers could achieve the standard set by the first two seasons. To my surprise, though, it did at times, and after several years, it is now considered one of the best seasons in the franchise. However, I must also admit that after extensive evaluation, it has become apparent that this is probably the most overrated of all 5 seasons. This does not make Tamers substandard, though, not by a long shot. The plot of Tamers, paradoxically, holds some of this season's greatest strengths and weaknesses. First of all, many consider the plot of Tamers to be the most intelligent of all 5, and to a degree this is true. Conceptually, the plot is practically unrivaled, as no other season deals with such subjects as algorithms, Reaper programs, and government agencies. However, this does not make the plot as engaging as it probably should be. For one, the overall execution of the plot is actually quite clumsy for the first half of the season. The modification of Digimon through the use of cards is a rather weird concept and really is not that great of an innovation, and it makes it appear as though the characters are merely playing a game. As opposed to previous seasons, where virtually every episode served a purpose, either to truly develop a character or to further the plot, Tamers tends to waste time with its first half. Many of the earlier episodes serve no overall purpose in the grand scheme, other than to perhaps allow the characters time to hone their skills. A good example of this is the episode It Came From the Other Side, where about two-thirds of the episode is really a pointless and overdrawn fight accompanied by probably the most unbelievable flashback. The overall quality of episodes, surprisingly, decreases during the Deva arc, and even when it increases significantly near the halfway point of the season, the plot still has to pass through several more pointless episodes before really developing around episode 34. From this point on, however, Tamers does nothing but get better. The fights become more pivotal, confusing plot points are finally explained, and the building resolution progresses. The final third is very well executed, and really is how the rest of the season should have been made. Again, this is an area in which Tamers is very much a mixed bag. Many viewers laud this season for treating its characters realistically, but from what I can see, much of the humanity that was present in the previous characters is lost here. The leader, Takato, starts off as more incompetent than either of his predecessors. Although many of his difficulties and dilemmas are well conveyed, his overall whiny reaction to many things gets rather annoying as it is an attitude that does not diminish until past the season's halfway point. In addition, much of Tamer's bad dialogue comes from this character. Nonetheless, Takato does experience a great deal of growth, but only right before and during the battle with the D-Reaper. The second character, Henry, is without a doubt the blandest character in the entire season. He starts off as uninteresting and really only serves the purpose of helping Takato during some of his less competent moments. His bond with Terriermon is quite well conveyed, particularly at the end of the season, and is one of his few redeeming qualities. In an effort to retain the whole protective older sibling character trait from Season 1, Henry has a younger sister named Susie, although his protective attitude towards her is less effective than that of Matt towards TK or Tai towards Kari. This is not helped in any way by the fact that Susie is easily one of the more aggravating characters in Tamers. Next we have Rika. Rika is the tomboy of the group, so to say, and unfortunately another aggravating character in this season. At first she really has no personality, beyond wanting to be stronger than everyone else, and she really comes across as a younger female version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Seto Kaiba. Her overall arrogance and stubbornness only augment this. For example, her partner Renamon nearly sacrifices herself to save Rika, and even after that, it still takes Rika quite a while to realize that her partner is more than a conglomeration of data. Many of her actions, such as her threatening kick towards Takato, are just embarrassing. Nonetheless, she does have her positive aspects. She is probably the only character in Tamers that has a real-life type of issue, that being a strained relationship with her mother. The voice acting for her character is actually quite good, and fits her overall attitude. Then there is Jerry. Now, Jerry is one of the characters that becomes a tamer later on, and it is important in that she is not only experiences a landmark moment in this franchise, the actual death of a partner, but also is pivotal in the attack of the D-Reaper. Her actual character is not great. She starts off as one of the more considerate and sympathetic characters in Tamers, mostly due to her interactions with Takato, but following the death of her partner, Leomon, she becomes exorbitantly depressed. Although this is important to the invasion of the D-Reaper, it is also rather annoying because it lasts for the duration of the only great segment of the season, and defies much common sense. For example, in a well-known scene, Beelzemon attempts to rescue Jerry from the D-Reaper, but she refuses because she has not forgiven him. Honestly, if someone is genuinely trying to save you, and everyone that you trust is yelling at you to accept that help, it only makes sense to accept it. The fact that her depression seems to leave her blind to all the hazards that she is surrounded by only magnifies how selfish she can be, making her one of the more difficult characters to actually empathize with. Oh, and that puppet she speaks with is just plain bizarre. Kazu and Kenta are nothing more than comic relief, while Ryo, the popular character from the WonderSwan games, just struts around with a cocky attitude and is pretty much useless for much of his screen time, except during the defeat of Majiramon and one D-Reaper agent. Finally, there is Beelzemon. This is inarguably the best character in the entire season, and definitely one of the best of any season. His inferiority complex, coupled with his struggle for redemption, makes for a terrific story. The only problem I have with this character is that his ultimate achievement of that redemption, at the end, falls rather flat. Overall, I must say that the adults are actually better developed than the main characters, which just doesn't feel right. Villains. One major problem I have with this season is that it takes an unnecessarily long time for the villains to be revealed. The first villain could be considered Yamaki, who is constantly monitoring the activity of Digimon, attempting to enter the real world. However, this guy doesn't do much at first, and it is eventually established that he is not evil, just paranoid. The second villains could be considered the Devas, the servants of the Digimon Sovereign, the four most powerful Digimon. However, these villains are quite ineffective, not only because they appear during one of the weakest arcs in Tamers, but also because most of them are rather one-dimensional. The only exceptions are Makuramon and Antilomon. Pretty much the only positive aspects of this group are that they provide for some pretty good battles, and two of them, Makuramon and Kitsuramon, set some important events in motion. Then there is Zukalmon, one of the Sovereign. This guy has some fairly clear motives that are actually understandable, and his initial display of power is impressive, or at least it would be if he wasn't subsequently beaten down by the weaker Mega Gargomon. Ultimately, Zukalmon was not a villain, but a xenophobic leader, and really ends up being one of the more average characters, despite the fact that his plans are the ones eventually used against the D-Reaper. Finally, there is the D-Reaper itself. This is probably the most unique and complex villain of any Digimon season, because it is not a sentient creature, but a program that believes it is carrying out its functions. Strangely, though, the D-Reaper appears to be inherently evil because it feeds upon negative emotions, but cannot comprehend positive ones. Some people do not like this villain due to its lack of personality, but I think its presence alone instills a feeling of hopelessness and fear, which is essentially half of what a villain is supposed to do. In addition, the Jerry-type agent, which disguised itself as Jerry to infiltrate the real world, demonstrates quite a lot of cruelty and malevolence, particularly before it reveals itself to Takato. This scene is actually one of the best scenes in the entire season, as it gives much insight into the D-Reaper's comprehension of things. It is only brought down by Takato's overall clueless responses, as he strangely cannot tell that the agent is not Jerry even after it has grown to its full height, sprouted wings, and begun to break its disguise. The D-Reaper also forces the group to adopt an alternative method of attack, other than a frontal assault, requiring more extensive planning on their part, which makes the final arc of Tamers a bit more interesting.